When it was first announced that Disney is going to be doing a live action prequel to The Lion King, a lot of people, myself included, were wondering, is this something that anyone is legitimately asking for? Because I don't think we needed to know the origin story of Scar and Mufasa, but Disney saw that the previous movie made so much money that they're like, well, we need to do a follow-up to that in some way, shape, or form. And this is the result. Mufasa box office, The Lion King prequel scores $87 million internationally and $122 million globally. Now, this is something that Disney is trying to boast about, saying that they're the #1 movie in the world, but there's a lot of caveats to that and a lot of other facts that go along with this that probably aren't favorable to Disney, but they're going to try to spin it in the most positive way possible, because otherwise this movie right here is just a huge embarrassment for them. Mufasa has reigned supreme at the global box office, but The Lion King prequel is lacking the bite of Disney's prior live-action adaptation. The movie, a prequel to director Jon Favreau's 2019 photorealistic The Lion King remake, powered to $87.2 million overseas and $122 million globally. While those ticket sales were enough to top the worldwide box office charts, the film landed far behind pre-release expectations of $130 million overseas and $180 million globally. And I did a video a couple days ago talking about those early projections, and I even said then if it actually hit $180 million globally, that's still a bad sign for this movie, because when you look at the previous movie, that opened up to $190 million or around $190 million just domestically during its opening weekend. So when I was looking at the early projections, I was saying if it's not even able to make globally during its opening weekend what the first movie was actually able to make during its opening weekend just domestically, well, then that's obviously a bad sign for this. But let's be realistic here. I don't think anyone expected this movie to do nearly as well as what the previous movie did. But I think a lot of people were expecting this to do at least somewhat better than what it's doing right now, because just take a look at the box office result domestically during this opening weekend. Mufasa also missed projections in North America, debuting to just $35 million, or landing in second place behind Paramount Sonic the Hedgehog 3, $62 million. Now, Sonic the Hedgehog 3, $62 million. That's actually a little bit higher than what the early projections were. That kind of opens up to along the lines of what we've seen with the previous Sonic the Hedgehog movies. And I'll talk more on that in a moment, but $35 million domestically during the opening weekend for Mufasa. When you compare that to other previous Disney releases, like let's say The Marvels, which opened up to $47 million domestically during its opening weekend, that's not a good sign for it. Now, granted, during the global opening for The Marvels, that was $110 million. So just behind what we're seeing with Mufasa, which makes sense because the Lion King movie seems to do a little bit better overseas than it does domestically. So this is to be expected. But when you also consider this, The Marvels opened up to $47 million and $110 million globally during that opening weekend, and it ended its theatrical run at just over $200 million. That was obviously a bad sign, and the movie lost so much money that Disney finally had to admit that, okay, the MCU has been kind of off the rails lately and we need to change course. This is the movie that sparked them to kind of do that shift in their future strategy. So I'm just wondering if the Mufasa doesn't rebound after this, if we're going to see something similar where Disney starts to reevaluate their live action releases. I think we're definitely going to get that following next year's Snow White, because by all accounts, it looks like that movie's going to be a huge bomb for them and it's going to lose hundreds of millions of dollars. And if we have this one right before that, then I think at that point, they pretty much have to admit it's like, okay, people don't like what we're doing in recent years. They've already replaced the head of the studio who greenlit all these live action adaptations of their previous movies. So we'll just see if they're going to continue down this line or if they think they just need to make the movies better. Maybe that's the case if they just made better movies. But in all honesty, like I said at the start, this is something that people really weren't asking for, but they did it anyway because the last one made so much money. They just kind of had to continue with it. So talking about the results, Mufasa, which also has to overcome so critical sentiment, features music by Hamilton creator Lin-Manuel Miranda, as well as the voice cast of Aaron Pierre. Okay, so it's going about that. The film carries a huge price tag above $200 million. So Disney needs Mufasa to stick around through the new year to justify its cost, and continues the studio's box office streak. Inside Out 2, Deadpool and Wolverine, Moana 2. Yeah, Disney's had a pretty decent year in 2024. But I think this is kind of ended on a sour note because I don't expect this one to make nearly as much as what those other movies made. I think those movies succeeded because they were stuff that people were actually excited to watch, and especially Deadpool and Wolverine. And they're movies that knew their target audience and were catering to it. Mufasa, on the other hand, is literally just a cash grab trying to rewrite a lot of the lore for The Lion King in order to try to give them something to talk about, and people just aren't interested in. And we can see that reflected in the box office. Talking about the reception to it, though, I don't think that's as much of a factor, because when you look at 2019's The Lion King, critics didn't really care for it. Audiences were generally positive towards it. And if you look at this one, it's pretty much along the same lines. What's that? Yeah, so it's pretty much the same with the audiences. It's a little bit better for critics, but not by much. Still not very good for critic score. A lot of critics that were giving it the positive scores, you can read those reviews and see like it was mostly negative, but they're trying to at least placate it in a little bit more of a gentle manner in order to not necessarily lose their Disney accessibility. So take with that what you will. You can just go on here and read a lot of those reviews. That's maybe be anecdotal, or maybe there's just a few of them, but that's just kind of what I personally noticed when it came to a lot of these scores. But like I said, audiences were generally along the same lines. What this tells me is basically audiences who are going to see this movie feel the same way about this new one as opposed to the previous one. The only difference is there are significantly less people actually going to watch the movie when it came to the previous one. Now, I will be a little bit fair and point out the fact that this is opening up just before Christmas. For family movies like this or like Sonic, you can expect to have a boost on Christmas Day, because, well, actually even next weekend too, because a lot of the times families will actually maybe hold off going to the movies this last weekend because like, well, we're just going to go on Christmas Day. Some people, that's their tradition. They open up their presents and then they go to a movie before they have their Christmas dinner and all that stuff. So maybe we can expect that come Wednesday and next weekend, where we'll see a pretty strong hold for Mufasa the Lion King, where it'll actually do significantly better, or it'll actually, it maybe not make more money, but have a decent hold. So then we can actually get a better idea whether or not the movie is going to be a failure, because with the amount of money they spent on it, it probably needs to make, at the most conservative estimate, $500 million globally in order to turn a profit at the box office. But that's just a very conservative estimates. Realistically, this probably needs to make closer to maybe $650 million globally in order to be considered profitable for Disney. And with the way things are going right now, it's highly doubtful whether they'll actually achieve that. Like I said, after next weekend, we'll have a better idea for that. Meanwhile, Sonic the Hedgehog, it opened up kind of in line with the previous movies, just under Sonic the Hedgehog 2. But that doesn't seem to be too bad, because Sonic the Hedgehog 2 opened up at a different time. And likewise with Lion King, we're probably going to see more coming next weekend and on Christmas Day. And the sentiment around Sonic the Hedgehog 3 seems to be significantly more positive than Mufasa, and also more positive than even some of the previous movies. And that's with critics and audiences. So I'm expecting this one to do pretty well. Not necessarily do great. I think it'll probably make along the lines of what we saw with Sonic the Hedgehog 2. So like it'll end its theatrical run around $400 million, which is a pretty good haul for it considering how much they made. It's not going to make a huge profit or anything like that, but it's still enough for the studio to be confident to greenlight it for a fourth movie. And I don't think necessarily that this will make more money than Mufasa. I think there's a possibility if next weekend comes around and we see no one shows up to Mufasa and it has a steep drop off, and there's a strong hold for Sonic 3, then there's actual scenario where I think Sonic the Hedgehog 3 could make more money, not only for their respective studio, but actually just make more money total than Mufasa. And if that's the case, Disney really has to reflect on what went wrong with their company. One of the things I think is kind of interesting with Sonic the Hedgehog 3 being so successful is that if you remember when the first movie came around, there was that first trailer where people hated the design of Sonic and were not shy about voicing their opinion. And the director, instead of saying like, well, if you don't like it, just don't watch it, or we worked hard on this and you're just is and foes. I don't know why they would say that, but they're just attacking the fans for not liking the design. They didn't do that. Instead, they're like, okay, we hear you. We're going to work to go back and spend a lot more money to try to change the design to make it something that people will actually like. As a result, they endeared themselves to the fan base, and they made a movie that was decent enough to warrant several sequels, and everyone seems to be highly respected and praised. So at least from audiences for Sonic. So I think what Disney should do is start doing what they did for Sonic, was you listen to the fans, give them what they want, and as a result, they will give you money. But if you continue on to just trying to do these soulless cash grabs and just insisting that this is what you need to do, and if you don't like it, then I don't know, kick rocks or something like that, kind of the attitude that Disney's been having lately, well, then you're going to see their movies fail. Like with Mufasa, it's pretty much, I guess, accepted at this point that this is probably going to be a bomb, but we won't know for sure exactly how bad until the next coming weeks. But let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. If you saw Sonic or Mufasa, which movie did you like better? Or have you only seen one of these, or are you just not interested in these altogether? Comment below, let me know. And also, if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest in entertainment news. And don't forget to click that like button and share this video out there, because it really helps out with the channel. Thank you.